So hi, my name is Tiffany. I am a senior UX designer who is exceedingly passionate about accessibility, universal design, and how we can try to achieve that within the digital space. I'm all about equity in as many forms as I can get them. And so in this workshop, I'm hoping to try to get you to come on over to my side and think about becoming an accessibility designer. So just to be clear, this workshop is more or less meant for designers who are entering or have entered the UX UI space and maybe went to a boot camp where, the most they mentioned about accessibility was, to download the Start plugin for Figma or Sketch. Or, maybe you're trying to make accessible digital products and don't really know where to begin when trying to understand the nuances of the space. There's a lot to learn here. But I just want to offer a welcome to everyone. It's good to have you here. Okay. Now I'm not gonna lie, I'm relatively new to this space myself, so don't judge me. Do you know what I mean? But my hope is that after hanging out with me, you would see that getting into accessibility design is like fun. For one, it definitely challenges your design chops. Okay. But it's a great way to bring some equity to the digital space and frankly to be required for everyone for the most part. So let's get into some numbers, right? I recognize that as UX designers, a lot of us are driven by data. So for the sake of context, I'm only going to concentrate on US numbers, but feel free to do your own research based on your particular location. So in the US currently-ish, there are around 330 million people. And according to the CDC, about 61 million people live with some sort of disability. And within those numbers, right, disabilities are especially common in older adults, women, and minorities. Okay, get into it. With the highest percentage of people living with disabilities located in the South. So when the conversation comes around that designing for accessibility is not a priority, what I'm hearing you say, okay, is that you are not willing to design for about 18.5% of the population. And if I had to hazard a guess here, okay, I think a lot of that stems from our favorite culprits, right? Implicit bias, ableism, racism, capitalism, the isms, and there's a lot of them, okay? But I have to ask, if you're not considering and advocating for accessibility and universal design as part of your process, then who exactly are you designing for, right? So I know that we've all heard the statements that empathy is a huge part of the design process. And yet for some reason, when it comes to having empathy for users with disabilities, it's like the empathy girls just packed up and left. They were just kind of like, we don't have empathy for those folks, right? Like let's consider for a moment the language that we use when it comes to folks with disabilities. And while we do this, I really want you to listen to not only what is being said, but also the quiet part. Because if you listen carefully, you'll find that the language used to other sounds eerily familiar. So, trigger warning for ableist comments ahead. I'll put on my best voice for this. I don't even think of you as disabled. But like, how disabled are you really? You don't look disabled. Oh my gosh, it's so inspiring that you are able to accomplish despite your disability. I'm glad that's not me. We can always come back and add accessibility later. That's not the priority right now. Okay. We couldn't find anyone with a disability for our UX research, so we're just going to decide for ourselves and move forward with the design. It's okay. Now, I know for me, when I hear these types of comments, it feels like there's a level of erasure happening, right? Sort of like an out of sight, out of mind. Like if I don't see you or have to acknowledge you or any of your lived experiences, then I don't really have to try to solve for your design problems, right? And like, what even are your design problems? Well, let's talk about disabilities. So in order to try to understand the problem, let's first talk about what constitutes a disability. So we've got vision disabilities, mobility and physical disabilities, hearing disabilities, cognitive or learning disabilities, situational disabilities, temporary disabilities, and invisible disabilities, just to name a few. It's also important to keep in mind that while the phrase people with disabilities may refer to a portion of the population, even within that, this is still a diverse set of folks with a wide range of needs. Again, we are not a monolith, right? We know this. So now in the digital space, the design accessibility problem that most of us, right, are familiar with is color contrast, right? This idea that there should be enough color contrast between elements stacked on top of each other in order to allow for differentiation between foreground and background. And this tends to be where some designers tend to focus their accessibility practice as sort of a one and done type of deal. But oh no, friends, there's more to this than meets the eye. See what I did there? Okay, I'm so sorry. So you might be asking, what are some of the things to take into consideration when trying to solve for accessibility within the digital space? Well, right? You're gonna have to understand that there are folks who can only navigate the digital space via keyboard. So plan accordingly. What does your focus state look like? What that header tag, page hierarchy, and semantic HTML do, right? Okay? Understanding the different type of tech out there that disabled folks use to navigate the digital space. Get into how Dragon Naturally Speaking or screen readers like JAWS work. Heck, if you have access to a computer, turn on the accessibility settings and see what it's like when you try to navigate your most beloved website. And I guarantee you might be surprised. But it's getting better, I will give it that. So, understand that access to high-speed internet and the latest iPhone or Android, do folks design for Android, even though a good portion of people have Androids, or even any sort of assistive technology counts as an accessibility issue. Some of these things, as I've mentioned, are very expensive, and not everyone has access to them, hence the accessibility issue. There's speaker Crystal Preston Watson did a great talk back in January called Broke with Accessible Taste, which was both eye-opening and heartbreaking, and I encourage you to check her and that particular talk out. You're also going to have to understand that the language that we use also counts as an accessibility issue. The average American reads at a 7th to 8th grade reading level. So for the UX content writers out there, we got some accessibility design for you too. You have a whole moment, okay? Now, I understand that for those of you who work at jobs where there are no accessibility specialists, the onus will most likely be on you to decide if you want to work in that space. And so, should you consider it, and I highly encourage that you do, I would recommend from a starter perspective that you pick up Inclusive Design for a Digital World by Regine Gilbert. Book plug, hey girl, hey. I think she's on this panel somewhere too. For me, it was a great book to start my journey to accessibility, and I cannot talk about it enough. It's so book, and I have a wealth of books to read, but that one's a good one. Now, I happen to be rather fortunate in that the company that I work for has an entire team of amazing accessibility specialists that I can pester with all of my WCAG related questions. Spoiler alert, there's a lot. Again, there's a lot to learn in this space, especially if you're new. In particular, it was my close work with my teammate, Ferio Halarjani. She's one of our senior accessibility specialists, and she has the patience of a really benevolent soul, because I was in her DMs constantly with questions about how I could make my designs better based on, what kind of accessibility things that I had to pay attention to. And in the real world time, she really opened my eyes to how damaging it is to not include accessibility in your design work, especially when you consider how things like screen readers and speech recognition technology works. Reading about it in a book about how accessibility works or doesn't work is one thing, and then it's actually a whole nother pot of Kool-Aid to see it happen in front of you, and it gives you a different added perspective. And so what I want to do is run one of her exercises right quick. It's actually one of my favorites because I hear this complaint from designers all the time. So now I have to get into my game show host bag, because we're going to play Name That Icon. Also known as put a label on the dang icon, because don't nobody know what that means. Okay, so you have about 5 seconds. I'm gonna flash some cards up here. You have about 5 seconds to guess each icon. So get your pens and papers ready. You ready? Okay, go. Okay, so how did you do? I mean, if anybody got them all right, hit me up on Twitter. I'd love to know. I'm curious if you got them all, because some of these were quite interesting. It was definitely an eye-opener when she introduced this exercise to us. So why are labels on icons important? Well, icons in particular are subject to different meaning, usually based on context. But if you have no label, how are you supposed to know the context? The pen icon, for example, can be interpreted in all the ways, right? It could mean sign, it could mean write, it could mean edit. So unless you are really good at icon interpretation, there's no guarantee that your user is going to know what information the icon is meant to be conveying. Not to mention, with the way that some assistive technologies work, no labels also might give an additional problem to how they navigate the space. So this includes correctly labeling things. So for example, the icon that looks like 3 lines stacked on top of each other, and depending on how you use it, it sort of looks like, most people would associate it with the menu icon in this case, but for some reason in the code it was labeled as a hamburger. So this poor individual trying to use their speech recognition to open the menu had to guess that it was called a hamburger. Okay. And so here's the thing, right? Whether you're using assistive technology or not, this is a good practice from a universal design standpoint. Not every icon can represent everything in every language, in every culture. So, and a segue here, this is a shameless plug for having a well thought out design system. I'm a design systems designer. Because some of that will have already been thought out and researched, that across your system, one icon should always and forever within that system have consistent meaning. So shout out to the design system designers out there, keeping it consistent in these streets, okay? So now that we're equipped with a bit of knowledge, let's get into a bit of testing, shall we? Let's see who is out here making accessible websites for the people. So some of the things that I look for when using my very, very, very basic knowledge of accessibility is that I will go to a website and see if I can complete an action using only my keyboard. So that will off jump tell me a lot of things. And sometimes for spits and giggles, I'll even zoom in about 300%. I think the max is 400, and then try to navigate that way as well. Now, if your immediate thought as I'm explaining this is to say, but like no one uses the website like that. I'm going to give you grace because I understand that, like most of us, you are working through those implicit biases and ableist thoughts, right? Okay, so let's start with a fun one. Let's go book a vacation because I know I need one. Plus, it's my birthday soon and I am in desperate need of a turnip. Okay, so let's go head over to the Scott's Cheap Flight website. I love this website. It's great. And so I'm gonna strictly use my keyboard, which I'm gonna be doing by using the tab key. So I'm just hitting tab. Okay, okay, the logo, excellent. This is what I mean when I say focus state. Yes, right? So it tabs through and you can pick which ones it goes to, which is great. I'm not sure about the legibility, or not the legibility, the contrast between the white and the orange, but I trust that this website knows how to, that has someone has looked at the start for this, right? So let's see, let's just go how it works. So I hit that, look at this. And so you have to tab through again. So, right, so these are also things to keep in mind. Where does the focus go after you've hit enter as you're using this on the keyboard? Oh, look at this. So it tabs through to the links. Now that particular link is not necessarily as focus friendly just because it's really tight. But again, I appreciate that there is a focus state there. But now I'm trying to understand where I am on the page. And so this is again where contrast comes into play, right? So did I skip something? Where did it go? So if I'm backing up now. So so it looks like Learn About Premium is where I am. And then after I tab out of that, I have no clue where I am. I don't know. So where was I before? So I was on the limited premium elite portion of that. Okay. That is interesting. That's one way to do that, right? And then if I tab though, and then it ends up learn more, I can barely see the outline of that. And then it takes you to the FAQs, which have a better, bolder version of this. So again, look into how your favorite websites stack up. So that was sort of okay. Progress is being made here and there as we go. Let's check out the Powell's books, because it's one thing I like to do is I like to read on my vacation. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so I want to search for, what all is out there nowadays? There's so many great books. Let's try to search for Hair Love, or at least browse the bookstore. So I'm tabbing through. Okay, so does anyone know where I was on that website? I don't know. Do you know? Did it tab through things and I missed it? Okay. Vaguely find a store, events, blog. Okay. Browse. Okay, so I got into search. So let's do Hair Love by Matthew Cherry. Okay. Here, that's barely a link underlined, but I appreciate there isn't even an underline for the link. Hit enter. It's thinking. Excellent. Okay, so now I have no clue where I am. Wait, did I miss a thing? I don't know where I am on the page. I'm just using my keyboard. I would like to add this to my cart. But it does not look that is happening on this Good Here Today. Wait, okay, I finally got to where was I before? Maybe? No? Okay, well, I guess I will be buying that book on today. So, you know, that's really the level of frustration that folks with disabilities go through when they're trying to do simple everyday activities, right? So now imagine all I was doing was trying to buy a book to take on vacation with me, right? So imagine if these frustrations happen when you're trying to register to vote, book a doctor's appointment, buy groceries, send money to your family overseas via a bank app. Oh, and here's an added kicker. I don't know if you know this, but we will eventually get older. I mean, there's some of us who already, as part of the aging process, right, already wear glasses or maybe have astigmatism or start to lose vision clarity because you've been staring at your screen for so long, because that's literally what we do for a living, right? So when you don't design for accessibility, you are also not designing for your future self and the people coming after you. So, I mean, that's a thought. I mean, unless you really enjoy your parents yelling at you over the phone as you try to troubleshoot why the button to unsubscribe is small and they can't see it, and you're trying to tell them where to click the dang thing, you know, just, mess. Dark patterns are a whole nother pot of Kool-Aid, but that's a conversation for another day. But, you know, in any case, this brings us to the end of this endeavor, and I'm hoping that I have tickled your fancy and that you may consider dipping your appendages into the accessibility waters. I'm going to include a bit of extra info for books and folks to follow who are actually, you know, deep in the disability space here in a bit. But yeah, thank you to Omari and the State of Black Design for inviting me to hang out, and I'll see you around somewhere.